All right, Jen, welcome back on the show. Meeting under strenuous circumstances. We were just catching up before this about how this has changed our personal lives and working environments. But really want to dive down with you on especially the community that you serve, right? The disproportionately disadvantaged side of society that now we don't see anymore because we don't go outside, right? We're not connecting on social media with anymore, right? Because they might not be as connected. So I really want to dive into this with you about, what are the changes happening socially within our society that we might not be visible to us anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of factors at play. I think one of the biggest things for the young people that we serve is that home is a very challenging place for some of them to be. So not all of our students, but if you look at any of our target demographics, so if you look at a young person who lives in a household with all of the added strain of maybe one parent or two parents who are working on the front lines right now, a lot of people don't have the luxury of working from home and don't have jobs where they can be not working. So, there's a lot of instances where we have students who are under a lot of stress, young children, because they see, the added hardship in terms of the financial impacts of this. They see mom and dad who are going out, and especially for older kids who are aware of what COVID-19 means and what the impact is, there's a lot of added stress knowing that you have family members who have to go out in the community and be working and things like that. So there's stress there. We also have students who unfortunately are in situations where home is not a safe place for them, right? So students who are, exposed to domestic violence or addictions or severe mental health issues in the home, that is a very challenging situation to now be in that home all of the time with no break, with no respite. You don't get to go to school, you don't get to see your friends, you're not in other programs, you're not around other adults. So it's a very stressful time for the kids that we serve. And I think the biggest thing that we're noticing as an organization is that there's a huge focus being placed on, making sure that kids are keeping up academically. So, the government is putting lots of effort into, how is this panning out in terms of, reading and writing and math, and what kinds of resources are available to parents. The piece I think that's missing is the social, emotional wellness, the mental health piece. For a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, it's as important to be in school, to learn how to be with others, to learn how to feel good about yourself, to learn team dynamics and communication and all these things as it is the academic side. So where we see our role in this is really working to ensure that students have that outlet for creative thinking, creative problem solving, to connect with other peers, to connect with supportive adults, and focus on the social emotional piece of what's going on in this.
Yeah. I'd really like to dig deeper into that and any kind of cases you can share, because I think one of the most concerning things is the fact that we cannot directly engage anymore with the side of the community that needs the most, the kind of support. And I think everyone can kind of sympathize, being even a teenager or a kid and just wanting to go spend time with other people, right, than your family members, just because you got into a fight or had something you want to talk about or any issues. Just the idea of getting out and exposing yourself to other people sometimes is liberating, right? And when you're stuck in an environment which, like you said, might not be the best suited environment for them, their home environment is not being safe, that is really difficult.
It's very challenging. And I think, even for the students that we serve that have really supportive home environments, the majority of the students we serve are still dealing with food insecurity and poverty. And that is absolutely heightened at this time. A lot of students rely on lunch programs at school. They, rely on a lot of additional community supports that right now, organizations are doing their absolute best to be able to serve students in that way as well, but it's very challenging. And so there's a lot of added stress there. An example I would give in what we've been learning is, so as an organization, we came together, we spent the last couple of weeks really figuring out, where we could go and how we could serve the students that we work with. And so the team has been amazing. I work with an amazing group of people who are really smart and really committed to what we do. And they came up with some amazing opportunities to transition to online platforms for a number of our programs. So looking at very robust online classrooms where students would be connecting with each other and with our Dare Arts facilitators, where they would receive supplies kits in the mail so that they can be participating at home, and we would still have guest artists come on and they can be teaching them breakdancing and painting and all of these different things in an online classroom, which is very cool. But when we started having conversations with the Vancouver School Board, which is one of our amazing partner of ours in BC, the thing that we immediately realized is that the students that we serve in Vancouver specifically do not have access to the internet or any form of technology at home. And so, we have students in Toronto where there's certainly barriers to access, but at the end of the day, we're likely still going to be able to serve them. We're going to be able to run an online classroom. The kids in Vancouver, there's no option for that. And a lot of those students in particular are dealing with some very severe issues in terms of addictions in the home. And so you've got a situation where nobody can really reach them. So if you picture, a 10-year-old who's at home with no access to the outside world, and they have to, think about, for me personally, I'm sure for you, technology is what's sustaining all of the social piece of our life, right? We were just chatting before this in the evenings, you log on with your friends and you have a video chat, and some mornings I wake up and I feel like I've had such a social week. I've been out every night, on video chats. And that's not the case. The kids that we're working with, they don't even have access to that. So, now you're in an environment where there may be several children in a household. You might have a mom or dad who needs to be out working or who's struggling with other issues. You've got siblings who are trying to help care for the younger siblings, and you're completely cut off from the outside world. We're very happy to hear that in Vancouver, actually, there's some partnerships that are coming up where they're looking at offering things like, hotspots to communities in need so that kids can access Wi-Fi. But we still need the kids to have computers or iPads or something that they can loop in and connect with.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you talk a little about the shifts your organization has to face the last few weeks in order to serve these communities and what you're doing?
Yeah, it's been significant. So the biggest thing that I'll mention the positive first. The positive is that in any situation like this, there's actually a beautiful opportunity to pivot. And, I think that a lot of the time, an iterative model is a positive thing in any type of organization or business. And so the idea that we have to come together around this issue and then we have to really figure out a way that we're going to creatively problem solve is not a bad thing. It works new muscles in our brain and as a team. And so there's really been a very renewed sense of purpose amongst the team in how are we going to get on top of this. So we started by pivoting towards looking at the obvious, which is online programs. And so the teams come together and really looked at how that could function. How would a cohort of a core program, like 25 students who are pre-registered, come and log in and participate in this program? What does it look like? And some of the challenges you face are just the little things you don't think of. So, the team says to me yesterday, we've got to figure out how to quickly be able to sort of cut screens and audio and things like that, because what if somebody has, some siblings in the background that, as kids do, decide they want to do something, slightly inappropriate on video amidst a classroom environment, right? So there's all of these little things that you really don't think about. Or, if we wanted to do breakdancing with the kids in the home, what about a child who might have, 3 siblings and they're in a very small, closed environment? Is it going to be safe for them to do that? So there's a number of different considerations like that, but the technology is the biggest one. So access for the students, access in our northern communities, there is no access to internet in home environments at all. So for northern communities, cannot offer them remote online programming at all. And access to technology for our team. So that's been an interesting one, is if suddenly we're asking our facilitators to do online workshops to facilitate, lots of different classroom environments, suddenly we need a team who has the right lighting and equipment and can capture good audio so that we can produce something that is really going to connect with kids and resonate and keep them engaged. So I would say that the access to technology has been a big piece. that's a challenge for us, and we're navigating it as best we can. And then we're looking at online programs in addition to now doing several components in the mail, which is funny. I mean, in 2020 to be looking at the mail, but we are. So we're looking at disseminating Dare Arts kits that will come with a series of activities that will have full instructions and supplies and everything you need. And we would like to disseminate these into the communities we currently work with. So up in our Northern Indigenous communities, as well as through the Vancouver School Board, as well as through shelters and food banks. And that's a new target population for us that we're quite excited to be able to step in and support something for those kids as well. So that's a little bit of where we're at, how we're trying to do it.
No, it's amazing. Have you, are you partnered with any tech companies or anything that can help you navigate through all this?
We're not at the moment. I mean, you know, we've been, I think the last time I was on the podcast, I mentioned we've been so fortunate through the connections that we've made through Tech2O, and really connected with a number of individuals and companies who have supported it in a lot of different ways. You know, we through Tech2O, we met creative agency Art Mechanical, who's currently doing an entire communications project for us pro bono. So we've made some amazing connections, but we haven't onboarded any funders that would specifically be looking at supporting that gap in technology. And I mean, that would be the biggest thing for us. If we could say, you know, here's 25 students in our program and we can disseminate iPads to each of them, I mean, it would completely shift. Suddenly you've got a kid who can go into a space by themselves, completely engage, be, you know, really present in the programs that we offer. And again, it's a really important opportunity for them to have.
Is there a way to like crowdsource this? I'm sure there's like people in the community who are willing to commit some funds to help these kind of causes if you can reach them, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a great idea. We're always looking at different ways to connect with more people and see what we can do. I mean, one of our focuses right now is also in terms of, obviously there's the piece around sustaining operations as well as funding and impacts from the crisis on that as well. And so we are placing some of our resources into pivoting our gala, which is a very important fundraiser for us. It raises 25% of our annual revenue. So when we originally looked and said, we can't host an in-person gala, what are we going to do? And we sort of said, well, how are we going to be Dare Arts? You know, we talk a lot about creative problem solving. We talk a lot about, you know, encouraging our students to push their comfort zone and think outside of the box and all of those things. And so with our gala, we decided to think outside of the box by thinking in a box, which is that we're creating a gala in a box, essentially. So we've got these brave boxes that are going to go out on June 4th, and rather than having 350 people come to a gala, 350 people are going to receive boxes in the mail that are going to have, you know, really creative kind of daring activities in them. And there's going to be food and beverages and all of these things. And it's going to be paired with an online participation component where they can hear from youth in our programs and things like that. And so I think some of our focus has been placed there just because we want to make sure that we still have the funds coming in to operate, and then balancing that with needing to do things like crowdsourcing technology and making sure that we're connecting with youth. So there's a lot going on, and our team is sort of working well into the night and really focusing really diligently to make sure that this can happen for the kids that we work with.
Yeah, how's that shift been within the team? You touched a little bit about that. Are you guys are you guys in shock? Are you guys in reaction mode? Are you guys kind of been semi-prepared for this, working virtually? Like, how is your team structured?
Yeah, you know, I don't know if this is an anomaly or not. I do know that several people that I speak with are, you know, struggling with different organizationally with culture. For us, it's all been very empowering, I guess. I mean, we're a team of people that like to be creative and like to try new things. And so, you know, first you've got the energy of people just being the purpose, right? Wow, our kids are in really bad situations right now. We need to help them. And then you've got the, hey, this is kind of cool. Maybe we can explore new ways to work. And what would this look like in the future, you know, COVID or not? And so we now have check-ins daily with our leadership team by video, but we also check in with our whole staff team across Canada 3 times a week by video. And those ones are not staff meetings. They're just to come together and have tea and talk about what everybody's living and tell funny stories. And then we also have our usual staff meetings that we're doing by video, and we're on Zoom constantly when we're troubleshooting different projects. So as a result, our team is more connected than when we worked out of a physical space. when we worked out of physical space, I, personally have to be in meetings quite a lot outside of the office. And it's always a balance trying to figure out, like, I love the people I work with. I want to be there, and you want to be able to offer the right amount of support and leadership, but you've always got to be out. And every time you go to a meeting, you've got to take time to travel to the next meeting, right? And you've got to try and work the schedule effectively. So now we've got a situation where I can be in twice as many meetings in a day, and I can speak to my team all throughout the day. And I think everybody's more connected. I think everybody's more connected. And I think that before, where we would have a Toronto team, a head office team that would meet in person, and then we would loop in our other regions by video, it's kind of leveled the playing field. Like, we're now all in video. And so I would say we feel more like a team, a cohesive unit across the country, which is really kind of
That's so interesting, right? Like, even, I'm noticing this through the podcast, where like our capabilities have now become like 10 times full. We're having podcasts like talking to people in like from different countries, from France, from UK. I talked to earlier to Tim Ellison from Nova Scotia, right? And the interconnectivity has gone up. And one of the things that everyone's talking about is their time, right? Like before, going on video chats seemed like a foreign thing, right? You gotta take time out of your day, you gotta schedule it and do it. But now, because like everyone's at home anyways, and it's the only way to interact, now people are open to this. So it's more opportunity to connect people at a wider scale, right? Whether it be the people, your coworkers you're working with, or the community service, people have to connect in this kind of way, right? Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, and holders too. I mean, it's interesting because the nature of everybody being at home, people are just a lot more accessible. If I've got somebody who I would really like to speak to from, one of our major funders, and they're very busy people, obviously working in leadership positions in corporate sectors. And it's a lot easier now to say, just jump on for 30, just share 30 minutes of your time. They're happy to do that by video. And I mean, I find, obviously you're saving the commute time, and you're saving the time you're meeting. So I'm getting more work hours in a day, and yet life feels a little bit simpler. There's less moving around everywhere. And I do again acknowledge, like, I think it's an incredible privilege and luxury to be in a situation where I do get to work from home, and where I get to, continue earning an income and doing what I'm passionate about, and doing it in a format that now I can, go for a longer bike ride in the middle of the day, because I've got all these other hours that I can just work around the clock, right? So I feel fortunate for that. But certainly for our organization, it's starting to make us question. I think that at the end of all of this, we'll likely come together as a team, and I will pose the question to the team, what's the preference? Is it a model where this is 50% of the time, that it's kind of a set structure where 2 days of the week or 3 days a week, everybody works at home on the same days and connect by video? Is it something where some people just choose to work remotely permanently, but they loop in by video? Like, where, obviously we want, as an organization, support everybody to work how they thrive. So I'm going to be very curious to see how it comes out, especially after a few months. If people say, well, that was a fun experiment, but I would really like to be in the physical office, or whether this is just the way of the future and how we work.
No, absolutely. It's cool seeing from NGO's point of view too, that you agree, because I'm talking to a lot of other companies, from big corporates to startups, and they're seeing, why was I paying $20,000 for an office space? Why was I forcing people to come in an hour by commute in a super, in an area like Toronto, where traffic is horrible, right? I mean, people have so much more time when they're like working in this kind of way. And I think we touched upon it in our previous episode, where it's like now it's 100% less work-life balance, and now 100% work-life integration. How do the two kind of work together, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, it's more free. You can step out and like do your personal stuff, and then right away switch into work, and you kind of be bouncing back around, but it's more liberating in that kind of way.
It's interesting. I had a conversation this morning with a colleague in my field who runs another nonprofit. And we were talking about this because he was saying that, he has some staff or knows of people where it's created, there's an increased anxiety because they may actually prefer a strong delineation between, or compartmentalization of, their work hours and their personal hours. And that being at home, working from home, creates some added anxiety and stress because they really want to be away from that environment when they're working. For me personally, I've been a proponent of that work-life integration for many years. And, one of the things that's kind of neat is that now that we don't sort of get up and go to an office for 8 in the morning, if I'm a bit of a night owl, sometimes I get lots of energy at night. My team this morning on our call said, I saw you were editing that document at 1:30 in the morning, Jen.
Yeah.
But it's great because, I went out last night and I biked to, Etobicoke and back. And then I had all this energy, and at 10 o'clock I started working again. And then I worked until about 2 in the morning, which when you're passionate about what you do and you're energized by it, it's very freeing to know that I can work till 2 in the morning when my mind is really energized, because I don't have to get up at 6 and immediately start, in the middle of the chaos. I kind of slept in until about 8:30 and then started again. So there is
You roll out of bed and you're at work.
Roll out of bed and go to work. I mean, exactly, right? Yeah. Especially like before the video calls start, you really just roll out of bed and go to work.
Absolutely.
So it's,
all you need is a laptop or your phone, and then you just need some kind of device to connect with. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are seeing the freeing aspects of this, right? I mean, the biggest constraint with a lot of people, some people are toying with the idea of working from home, freelance, all this stuff. But there's still that kind of barrier for getting high level work, because high level work requires you to come into a 9 to 5 or into an office environment where the company wants to control all aspects of your working environment. But now people are seeing that, even companies are seeing that, the freeing aspect of it. I mean, talking about working at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's kind of like how I work and why I'm an entrepreneur. Is I almost continuously, almost for the last few years, been working around that time frame, right?
Yeah.
But and people used to tell me, it's like, you should schedule your emails so people will get it at like 8 o'clock instead of 2 in the morning, so you don't get backlog and all this stuff. But now people aren't doing it anymore. They're working freely as it is.
Yeah, that's right. What's funny about that is for years, I find leadership as a subject very fascinating, right? And I had been doing a lot of reading on the importance of respecting boundaries of your team in terms of the influence that you carry, even if you don't necessarily acknowledge it. So this is probably a pain point for me in my leadership, because I just feel so connected to my team, just like people. We're friends, we work together, we collaborate, we're colleagues. And so sometimes you might sort of forget that there is still an inherent sort of influence or a power dynamic that exists by being the leader of an organization. So I used to work at all hours of the night, and I would send things out. And then somebody said to me, how do you think it would make somebody on your team feel? Does it add pressure? Do they feel like suddenly they should be working at 2 in the morning? Do they feel like if they get something at midnight on a Saturday when they're out with their friends, that they should leave what they're doing and go answer you? What is that doing? And so I started pulling that back and doing all of the timing of emails so they go out in the morning and all that. Last week, I said to one of my team members, I've got to send out all these stakeholder emails to some of our funders. I'm going to be working all weekend. Like, is it okay if I send this on Saturday night? And she said, Jen, time knows no bounds now. You can email people whenever you want, because everybody is on such different schedules. So it's a little bit freeing to say, now I can just work when I wanted to know that lots of other people are doing that. And I've always encouraged, to be clear, like I've always encouraged in our organization that we don't really have set sort of like hours in physical space. So work where you want, when you want, as long as you're available when you need to be and you do great work, do it in a way that works for you. Some people love a structure 9 to 5 or a 7 to 3, and some people just want to work all throughout the day and night. And I think it has been very freeing for people. Everybody can do their own thing. I have people on my team who are they're up at 5:30 in the morning. They start work at 6:30, and they're very structured of how they do it. And that's great for them. And they can still do that in this format. And then I have other people where we can kind of, be bouncing ideas around at 1 in the morning on a Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, how that worked for your company culture? Now that people are a bit more free and things are a little bit more relaxed, right? And the dynamic has changed. Have you felt like the creative output has increased, or has organizational capabilities gone down? Like what has happened? What's dynamic here?
Yeah. So the thing I was most concerned about was productivity. And the interesting thing is I wasn't concerned at all, I should say, not as a result of my team. My team's amazing. And I already knew going into it that they work really hard and they're really committed. So it's a lower risk than a lot of other organizations. But I still thought, what does it look like? What is the balance? Will some people find it more distracting to be at home while others will be more focused? You know, what will happen? So productivity was my first concern. And then the other concern was just people kind of feeling connected. What we've ended up finding, the biggest thing is that our team is more in the loop. So before, I was sensing across different departments that sometimes there's a gap in information sharing, right? So you've got one person working on something and somebody's going in another direction on something else, and there's a missed opportunity to connect, and there's a bit of a miscommunication, and it decreases efficiency. You've got to go back and rework it. And what I'm finding now is that because we're so connected by video, and it's so easy to just hit a button and zoom somebody in for 2 seconds, everybody feels much more in the loop. Everybody feels more in the loop around what our goal is as an organization right now. People feel way more in the loop in terms of what people are doing in different regions. So knowing what the Vancouver program is doing and the Toronto program is doing and the Northern Ontario program is doing, and being more in the loop with one another in terms of how they can support and collaborate and create together. So I would say that the synergies increased, the creative output has increased, the productivity is right where it's always been, if not increased, because everybody is so committed to make it happen. I mean, I would say increased actually, because the pivot had to happen fast. You know, we can't just not serve our students for a couple months while we figure this out. It's got to happen now. So it's yeah, I mean, it's an odd thing to say, right? Amidst a global pandemic, that there's some positive silver linings, what there are. And I mean, if that's the way, that's always my take on life. I believe very strongly in perspective and you know, trying as much as possible to see where you can see the positives. And this is certainly one where we've found some positives here.
No, absolutely. And it's cool hearing it from you, from your point of view too, because I'm talking to a lot of entrepreneurs and they say the same thing. We're pivoting. You know, we're looking for the silver linings. How can we best serve our customer base, our community base, and do the work that we need to do effectively and continue driving on. And everyone's on this pivot. And that's the cool thing, is everybody is figuring the thing out. How has that collaboration been across other organizations? Are you working with other NGOs? Are you collaborating together and finding ways to work together or work silently?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, being candid, there's a huge dichotomy in the nonprofit sector, right? I mean, we are historically a decade behind, you know, for profit business in terms of the tools that we use and the technology and sometimes the approaches. And for me, that's one of my passion points in the sector, is really wanting to shift and transition some of how we work and how we think, and, you know, working on a faster paced model, a more iterative model, you know, more collaborative, a bit more innovative, being able to pivot and be flexible. And so I would say that it's certainly magnifying this sort of dichotomy between organizations that are focused in that way and organizations that operate a little bit more conventionally. So the organizations that operate more conventionally are really struggling right now. I mean, the idea of pivoting programs, if you've done one program the same way for 20 years and now suddenly you've got to come up with something new and it's not in your culture to kind of create and pivot, that's very challenging. And so, and even, you know, some organizations that have had the same cycle of funding or, you know, all of these different factors, it's a big change. So in the nonprofit sector, there's a lot of change aversion, and it's something I'm always working to kind of combat or get people energized around. And so we see that. Now on the flip side, most of the people that I am surrounded by in the sector are sort of like-minded people, and there's so much collaboration happening. So, you know, I'm part of something called the Epic Exchange, where we have cohorts of nonprofit CEOs, and we come together. So my cohort is 10 of us, and we are really engaged with one another. We meet basically bi-monthly, and we do 4-hour sessions where we dig into strategic challenges that we're facing. We share all of the personal side, lots of tears, lots of laughter around sometimes the weight of, you know, carrying an organization that, you know, nonprofits can be there's a lot of stress that goes into carrying a lot of that. And so that kind of group is now coming together amidst this crisis and leaning in even more. What are we learning from each other? You know, what's our communications and marketing strategy? What are people doing on social media? Even in terms of video statements, I was talking to another CEO this morning, and he said, "Oh, it was, you know, great to see the video statement you released, because I've been trying to follow what each organization is doing and then figure out what I might have to say and how I want to say it. So there's a lot of people leaning in just to, how are you doing? How's your organization doing? What challenges are you facing? How are you pivoting your programs? How are you pivoting your marketing, your communications, and your fundraising? How are you engaging with stakeholders? And then there's this other side where organizations are actually really increasing partnership, which is amazing. So I've had a number of conversations with organizations that are saying, how can we cross-pollinate with online programming? You know, we had previously been looking at an opportunity for partnership through a City of Toronto grant with another organization, and it was going to be for summer camp. But now we're looking at how can we run an online module jointly of a new program. So there's so much collaboration happening amongst different organizations, and the big thing is just support. The number of text messages I've got from like fellow, you know, nonprofit leaders just reaching out to say, how are you guys feeling? What are the stressors for you? How can we help each other? I was on a call this morning with somebody who said, like, for you personally, professionally, and as an organization, just tell me what I can do. You know, people are really rallying around one another.
No, absolutely. That's great that these kind of communities, these kind of support groups are existing. I mean, I can kind of emphasize the struggle between getting like a CEO to like open up about the personal struggles they're having, because they're so used to containing and being in the leadership role where they have to, silo themselves, their personal feelings out. I ran like a similar kind of group when I was working as an entrepreneur resident at UFT. We had about like 20 companies at a time building them. These are early stage companies. A lot of them are first time founders, a lot of them students. And, you know, it's a very emotional roller coaster. You talk about what you're building and seeing the next day, kind of idea falls apart, and another idea picks up, right? Especially early stage, a lot of back and forth. But to get people to open up and talk very candidly about what they're feeling and how, and to get, kind of express that emotion out, it's so powerful and yet so hard to do. It's hard to do in person, right? But how do you kind of build that kind of co-environment when it's virtual like this? Have you found that to be a difficulty?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I'm very passionate about exposing more sort of vulnerability and openness in leadership. And I think that more and more, there's more literature coming out that sort of suggests that type of vulnerability and authenticity is very effective in leadership. I've always believed, so when I was younger, I would work in some organizations where the culture was what I would say very business oriented. So just not a lot of sort of that more, you know, raw, real talk. And people would come in and they didn't really know that much about one another, and they would, you know, work on their project teams and get things done, and that was it. And when conflict would arise, I would always observe that it seemed that there would be a bit of a us versus them. And I started contemplating at that point in my career, what would it look like if we worked in organizations where we really knew each other in a really personal way, where when a conflict arises, the first thing you might do, oh, this person behaved in this way, but I know this person, and I know that maybe they were triggered by this, or maybe they did this out of this feeling, or I know that their intentions are good because I know they're a good person. So you start to be able to focus more on the problem and finding a solution instead of on the person, because you know the person, or you focus more on the person in a way, depending on how you look at it. So I think that having spaces where people can come together and create that kind of environment where you can really be honest and open is very powerful. And so for us with our team, you know, several months ago, I started thinking about how open am I with my team. So we share a lot when we meet together in staff meetings and things like that, but there was certainly a lot of vulnerability that I still hadn't shared. You know, I went through a major personal change last year when I was separated. And so, you know, a lot of that I still kept fairly private, with excluding a couple people in the organization. And more recently, I started opening up more about it. And it's been interesting because now on our video calls, I would say that the same thing is happening. So people are really sharing the really raw reality of some of what they're facing. And what I'm seeing is that everybody faces a unique challenge. That's the biggest thing that's hit me with COVID, is that when people are working in this environment and facing the challenges we're facing, they're completely unique to everybody. So one person might be struggling because they have elderly parents and they're very concerned about them, and they need to make sure that they're getting them groceries and taking their garbage out, and they're trying to keep them safe. Somebody else is struggling because they have an 18-month-old at home and they don't have additional supports in the home, and there's no way to explain to an 18-month-old that they need to get their job done, right? So that person is having that struggle. And then somebody else, like me personally, being candid, one of the big struggles has been that, I was in a partnership for a very long time with another human. And so now I'm in this social distancing mode and I'm alone. And so that's challenging, right? There's this, and so to go on video, and we actually spent the very first staff meeting we had after we all switched to remote work, which of course happened really fast, right? We had this business continuity plan. It went from phase 1 to phase 4 in 24 hours, right? And so we jump on this first staff meeting. And the first thing I did was started by saying, this is the challenges that I'm facing. And everybody opened up and shared like some very raw emotional pieces about what everybody's living. So I still find that our connecting just and creating that open dialogue. And I think you're right. I think in leadership, there is always a focus on making sure that kind of your optics are curated, or that you demonstrate the right amount of strength. And there certainly is a need in a leadership role to create a sense of calm and confidence, no doubt, right? Especially in crisis. I mean, your team needs to know that you're in control, that you feel calm about what's happening, and that makes other people feel calm. So that's a huge part of leadership. But you need to have a community where you can go and say, these are the parts where I feel like I'm buckling under pressure, or these are the parts where I feel like no matter how much I chase the thing I think I should be doing, I feel like I'm always failing in this area. So I think creating those communities, and I've heard of similar ones in entrepreneurial circles or for-profit business. I think the thing that's unique about the one we have is it's this very small, these cohorts are only 10 people. And so you're going in to a closed room that's completely confidential. And over the course of a year, now we're going into our second year, you're building really close personal relationships.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I think you got that formula right there. I think it's important to have that small circle of people you can rely on year after year, and that's cool. I mean, that's really interesting to have that kind of mind share component to it. And this program is continuing, like you said, virtually, right? Like everyone's still
we're continuing virtually. And I mean, if anything, again, it's been really helpful to see where everybody is at in terms of their programming. There's a number of people in my cohort who work in children and youth spaces, and everybody's affected and impacted differently depending on what kind of service or product that they offer. So it's been really helpful to just hear where people are at, and also just get different vantage points of the way that we view, the kids that we serve, and some of the challenges that we see and we hear when we speak to the families and the kids, and then what somebody else is perceiving. And then figuring out how we're going to all work together. So, the students that we serve, food insecurity, as I said, is a significant issue right now. So, you want to we've got to take care of this. We've got to figure this out. Now, are we the right organization to specifically address food insecurity? No, we don't have any expertise in specifically making sure that we're getting food out to kids, right? I mean, we do in the sense of within our program, we look at it and look at how we can make sure that we're offsetting meals for kids. But the better thing we can do is partner and collaborate with organizations who have that expertise. And so I think that's the thing right now, is like all the collaboration around who does what really well. So who does the academic supports really well, like a pathways to education with like mentorship and, all the tutoring and things like that. Who does that really well? And then who does the piece really well around, making sure that kids have something to eat? And, for us, who does the piece really well around making sure that kids feel like they matter and they are engaged and they see their potential and they express themselves and they dig deep and they find all of the magic and like the power of who they can be and what they can create in their life. And that's us. And so when you put all those pieces together, you end up in a situation where we're open is for God crisis. There certainly is a focus on some of the more obvious critical interventions that do need to exist when you look at shelters and when you look at food insecurity and things like that. But again, it's also really important that we don't forget about the 10-year-old who's at home, maybe doesn't have very much to do, doesn't have access to technology, doesn't have access to their programs or friends, or like, I mean, that's a really challenging thing. So it's how do we all collaborate to make sure that we're wrapping around the needs of the whole child and making sure that they're served.
Is there any cases that you can talk about, just to put like a human story behind what's happening right now?
You know, to be honest, my team has been focusing the most on connected to families and students just constantly right now. That's one of our main components of what we do, is making sure that we're kind of finger on the pulse of what kids need and where they're at. I've been so wrapped up, to be honest, in the strategy of trying to just be able to pivot and maneuver and get where we get, that I actually this morning, as a matter of fact, thought to myself, I need to get in touch with my program team and say, share all the specific stories of what everybody's living right now. Because what I get is a very high level, like this is what we're seeing. These are the trends of what we're seeing. These are the issues our kids are facing. This is how we think we can address them. And I was thinking that today I would really like to hear specifics of different kids in our program and what they're living right now. But what I can speak to more is on a whole what all of these kids are facing, and it's very challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the larger an organization is, the more a barrier the leadership has between the end clients, right? And you really have to trust the right people in between to provide information back and forth.
Well, yeah, and the thing that's interesting is, in the past, actually, I would probably have been the kind of leader where I would be a lot kind of in the details at different levels of the organization. And I spent the first 12 months with DearArts restructuring the organization and increasing scope of different roles and autonomy. And it's really sort of paid off in the sense that our team is just so capable. And so the interesting thing is, before, where I would have wanted to kind of like double check, what are those conversations happening, and what are we hearing? And now I know that my national program manager knows exactly what's going on, is completely in contact with her team, who is in direct contact with all of the communities that we serve, with the school boards, with the teachers, with the principals. And I can trust that when they say to me, Jen, these are the needs that we've identified and this is the direction we need to go, that I can trust that. And then I can spend my time rallying additional support and advocating for these needs and focusing on those pieces. But it doesn't discount the fact that I should have a few stories that I could share, because it's very, it's helpful to make it tangible for people to understand, right?
Absolutely, right? And that's what part of the struggle right now is. Everyone's kind of like shifting on strategy and trying to figure out how to keep things going as almost as business as usual, even though it's not as usual. What do you think? Like, if this thing continues on, lockdown procedures for 3 months, 6 months, 7 months, how do you think of existing as an organization? What, you have a plan and process?
Yeah, so we're fortunate because we offer a service that can pivot, and we still have a need that we need to address. The nonprofit landscape as a whole is in trouble. It's not good, because there are a lot of organizations that provide really important services to the community, but that might not necessarily have a place right now in the context of how people are living, but it doesn't mean that it's important services, right? And so as a whole, I'm very concerned about the sector and about the lack of focus that's being placed on, the nonprofit sector contributes significantly to our Canadian economy and is obviously a very important part of the social construct of the welfare of our citizens. And so I'm very concerned about the lack of focus being placed on that, and making sure that, even when you look at things like wage subsidies that come out, how are they addressing the needs of nonprofit organizations? Is the assessment process aligned with the fact that a revenue structure for a nonprofit is completely different than a fee-for-service model for a private business, right? So I think there's that piece of the sector I'm concerned. For us, we are fortunate because we work in human service, but in a way that we can pivot. So, our biggest concern is making sure that we find a way to effectively reach the kids that we serve. And this is what we'll discover over the next 4 to 6 weeks as we roll out all of these new programs or new formats of programs, is, can we effectively engage students the same way that we can in person? I believe we can, because we have an amazing team and they're creative and they'll problem solve the heck out of anything that comes up. Yeah. But I would say over the next several months, it's really about continuing to lean into the things that are working for our students, but recognizing that the need is going to keep increasing, because what we see ourselves as is really an upstream approach. So we're trying to intervene with students before they get to a point where they need to call kids' help phone, for example. And so it's amazing, right? The government stepped in for kids' help phone, and that's wonderful. Those are for kids that are in a crisis, right? What we're trying to do is prevent the crisis. We're trying to ensure that kids have adequate stimulation emotionally, socially, can learn and grow and feel supported and empowered in the situations they're living in, can feel a bit more control because they can be more aware. And so we are most concerned that if we are not able to continue doing what we do and other organizations like us, we're going to end up with a lot more young people in crisis. And that's what we don't want. And I think, we've always prided ourselves as an organization that we start at what we consider a point of early intervention, so age 9. And when you are able to reach a 9-year-old, it's very different than reaching a 15-year-old. If a child's living in a cycle of poverty and oppression, by the time they're 15, they're going to feel pretty differently than if somebody intervenes at 9. And so I think that's the biggest concern for us, is just we would like to see more of a focus on the mental health and the social emotional well-being, because focusing on the academic piece is not enough for kids, and particularly kids who face additional barriers that the kids that we serve are dealing with.
Yeah. So it kind of comes back to a pretty kind of a darker topic, especially Twitter has been kind of proponent of, right? Of like right now we're seeing a purge of the infrastructure laid out by the boomer generation, if you will, right? Like the older infrastructure that we've been put together, the older ways of doing things, from anything from the 9-to-5 job to just school in general to all this stuff, right? Like we're seeing almost a hard reset. There's like a catalyst. This event is like a catalyst for this real change that the new, I guess, wave of industrialization is bringing on. I mean, do you think we're prepared for this change, this drastic change?
No.
And no, right? Of course not. Of course not. We're not. But I guess within this opportunity of change, what are the types of change you would like to see? Right? Like, what are the radical changes that we can implement society-wide? Right?
Yeah.
When it comes to like restructuring schooling, restructuring working environments, restructuring things, right? What are some things you would like to see in your industry?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm fairly juxtaposed in this, because on the work side and the organizational side, I see only positives. Like really, I see only positives. I see decreased spending on infrastructure. I see increased freedom for people and autonomy. People feel happier in their job. They're more connected. Like I just see all positives. For young people, I don't see the same thing. And so I think that, are we ready on the organizational side? Debatably, yes. I mean, in the last 6 years, there's been a huge shift in terms of the way organizations offer work from home. I would argue that there was still, for my personal leadership style, like way too much sort of policing and things like that. Somebody who works from home, but they've got, Big Brother over their shoulder the whole day, seeing exactly what they're doing. And I mean, if you keep tabs on staff that way, they're not going to feel very empowered to kind of work the way that they're going to work best. That's my philosophy anyways. And so I think that organizationally there had already been a shift. And so we're ready. I mean, certainly I've heard of lots of issues from things like our board of directors, which are all in, most of them are in corporate sectors. And so I've heard things like, all of the blocks that are put in through their servers and things are now causing a problem because, they can't access like LinkedIn videos or something because they normally can't do that from the office. And now they've got the same blocks, and suddenly it's a little bit messy when they're trying to navigate different client relation strategies and things like that. So, but that can all be figured out. On the side with young people in education, I think it's a much bigger uphill battle because we had not made any headway. So it's not like, in business culture where the ball was already rolling. Now we just are, you know, it's going a little bit faster. I think that in education, we still have been working, you know, almost sort of the same way we did when I was a kid, right? I mean, there's more technology used now, but not across the board, because it's not seen as a necessity. Like how can we have kids, you know, growing into digital literacy and technology if we don't recognize as a society that having the internet and access to technology is a basic at this point, at this day and age. And so I think that for young people, the concern for me is, again, if you switch, you know, so a little bit of online learning, sure, maybe that's a positive. Maybe we're going to see that there's some opportunity for online classrooms and things like that. Maybe we're going to learn that kids don't need to be, you know, as scheduled for as long in a day academically, or that there's other things we should be adding into their school day. And maybe we'll learn that because now that kids are at home, they're benefiting from all different types of exploration and learning. But I would say by and large, my concern is that we just can't, we cannot serve young people through a computer screen and a TV screen. And so when you look at, you know, so moving aside where this goes after COVID, when you look at this right now, we have a society of people where grown-ups still have to work and kids need to grow and learn. And so these two are not mutually compatible, right? So you've got, you know, the best of what's being offered in terms of having kids still be engaged and stimulated is an app or a TV show. And that is just not the type of engagement that a child needs. And I mean, you know, what we see in our program is that we're already trying to increase that from a conventional school setting. So a conventional school setting, there's lots of interaction, there's amazing teachers, they're teaching their students, but there's still a ratio that makes it impossible for a teacher to really lean into different behaviors and students' needs. Now, Dare Arts, we take, you know, a cohort of students, we increase the ratio of teachers or facilitators, and then we have a scenario where when a child is acting out or feeling frustrated, somebody can pull them aside one-to-one and dialogue and re-engage and figure out what's going on. And it's so positive for that child. If you switch to an online model where kids are using apps and things like that, I mean, you're completely missing that whole social emotional piece where you're intervening and kids are learning and developing resiliency and all of these things. And so that would be my concern through social distancing. My concern is that kids are just not getting the type of interaction, support, engagement, dialogue, learning, growth that they need. Beyond the social distancing, I think it just maybe hits on the fact that we should be looking more proactively at technology and access to technology. And I mean, you know, obviously in the space that you're in, and I think we've spoken about this before, you know, the future of work revolves around technology. And yet young people are not in a position where they're really transitioning well into that. Now, kids that are in privileged environments they access, you know, wonderful programs, coding and developing all these things. But a kid who lives in a neighborhood where it's not necessarily safe for them to go out and walk around to different programs and spaces, so they're at home a lot of the time, and then they don't have access to the internet or a computer. You know, how is that kid going to have any type of equal opportunity to go into a world where in every corporate sector it revolves around digital literacy and technology? And so I think that so there's a silver lining. So hopefully, amidst all of this, there will be an emphasis placed on the fact that at this point in our world, if a child is accessing or experiencing a barrier to access, it's an issue. It's no longer something where we say, you know, that's a luxury and a privilege and it's not a necessity. It is a necessity. And it's already happened in the work world. It's a necessity to have access to technology. It's not yet there in schools, but as that starts to shift, we're going to see if kids are going to be at home for the next 4 months, they're going to need computers or iPads or tablets or something to be able to function at home. And so maybe that will help propel the conversation and the dialogue around the fact that right now there's a huge disparity in the advantage and disadvantage that kids face based on their socioeconomic situation and how that plays into digital literacy and technology.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's a compounding issue within the times, right? And the catalyst that has hit us all, COVID-19, has really exacerbated this issue. of the income inequality, access inequality, ability inequality, right, within our population. And kudos to you guys for continuing the fight and for bringing the support on. We're nearing the end of our episode, but I mean, I think we dived into a lot of different things. I love the idea of how you're pitting with an organization to keep delivering the kind of objectives that you need to do, and wish you guys all the best. One thing from our end, I mean, unfortunately, all this happened. Like we were before all this happened, we were doing monthly events, and we're actually gonna reach out to you. Where we want to put 20% of our proceeds where we got from our events and funnel into Dare Arts, because we like the issue that the issues you guys are going after, especially since you service an area that we really care about, which is Scarborough. We wanted to talk about that. Unfortunately, that is up in the air right now. But if there is any way that we can, share some links or any kind of funding opportunities to help support you guys, or just a knowledge share or anything like that, please reach out. Love to support from whatever network that we can deploy towards this. We'd love to.
I so appreciate that. Honestly, I mean, we really, really appreciate that. And, it's the thought that counts right now, and then we'll be back having events and we can make that happen. But I guess the thing too is just an important message is for us right now, these Brave boxes. So, just quickly to say the concept behind these is that we recognize that businesses right now are lacking in touch points with clients and colleagues and customers and vendors. And so the idea of this Brave box, this gallon of box, is that it's actually it's a client relations tactic, really. So somebody can reach out, and when they order this box for somebody, they'll custom messaging from their company to that individual, and it's cause driven because the proceeds are going to help our programs, a significant portion of them. But it also means that people can engage with something that's fun at home and receive something in the mail. And I think it's going to be great. So, I mean, if anybody's interested in Brave boxes, that's a great way for small businesses, large businesses, companies, everyone really to support what we do. And it's going to be a fun night, I think, doing this, the Brave event.
Yeah, please share that with us and we'll blast it out with our network. Absolutely. And for anyone listening in, where can they find more information about you and Dare Arts? Where can they go?
Yeah, so darearts.com is our website. We are also on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. We're soon to be on TikTok because that's where a lot of our young people live. We're very excited about that. Yeah, so darearts.com, and then of course LinkedIn, we're on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Jennifer Wilson, and Dare Arts is as well. And we love connecting with as many people as possible and expanding our network. So we certainly encourage right now. We need support more than ever. We need people to step up in terms of funding and partnerships and connecting new networks. So we welcome everybody to reach out and get in touch and learn more about what we do.
Perfect. Awesome. So I'm going to end the episode here.